This is TWiT.
Facebook's employees, some high-profile employees actually quitting, the rest doing a virtual walkout, upset over Mark Zuckerberg's continued unwillingness to censor the president. Thoughts?
I'd walk out too. I mean, I don't know what Mark Zuckerberg's doing here, but it's not a good look for him. And, you know, we've all known that he is not the most empathetic human being on the planet. So in a job that...
Can you deny he's doing exactly what's right for the company?
Oh, yeah.
You can.
I think it hurts the company, yes.
It hurts the company. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So I wrote a piece.
He has said, so, and I don't disagree with this. He said it on Fox News, social media platforms should not fact-check the president. He said
when your president is not telling the truth, maybe you don't fact check a president when they're actually. I think you should always fact check a president, but that's just my journalistic training.
I don't think that's the battlefield.
I think that's the job of journalists and newspapers. Is it the job of the platform?
Right. No, and that's why it's a false battlefield, I think. And so what I argue is that the issue here isn't fact-checking him. The issue here isn't taking him down either. I think Twitter did the right thing. The issue here is, what does Facebook stand for? And by doing nothing and choosing to do nothing, Facebook all but endorses the behavior. And when you have your employees walking out, when you have this going on, when you are in the midst of this horrible crisis, and this is happening, you can no longer just stand back and say, oh, it's freedom of expression. He has plenty of expression. It's not the issue. And nor can you stand back and say, oh, we don't fact check. That's not the issue. The issue is, what does Facebook stand for? What does Mark Zuckerberg stand for? What does this give to the public and the community that he has there? And he can't run away from that. So I think the Jack and Mark got into a fact check fight there. I think that's the wrong place to go here. They fact check stuff. That's not what is needed here. What's needed is for Mark Zuckerberg to say, this is unacceptable. Inciting violence is unacceptable.
Well, they would certainly say it if it were.
And that's why it's bad for the company.
If it were ISIS putting up a post, they would not only say that, they would take it down, right? In fact, they do. They take terrorist posts down. They don't want
terrorist posts down, but head of state posts. I think I can argue that Jack did the right thing, leaving it up, but not promoting it, putting a warning in front of it. In the one case, adding more information, but leaving it up for people to see what he says. I think is a legitimate decision that Jack made. But I think that Mark Zuckerberg, the other thing I said was, it's time to have this. I said this before last weekend. There's time to have a meeting of the oversight board, and the oversight board should have their own damn meeting, whether or not Facebook likes it. If they don't, then why does it exist?
Right.
Now, of all times,
I feel bad for those
it
people.
has to. And one of them was a friend of mine, Alan Rusbridger, the editor of the Guardian, former editor of the Guardian, and I haven't communicated with him on this. But if they don't at least deliberate on this issue, and there are things to deliberate on here, there are choices. I'm not suggesting that this is a case where the oversight board gives Mark Zuckerberg an order. No. But if you have 20 brilliant people there and you don't convene them to at least advise.
He also spoke to the president on Friday.
That's scary in and of itself.
And apparently does that regularly. At least I saw some reporting.
That's scary.
I really don't know what the answer is. On the one hand, I almost feel like they should be common carriers like the phone company, and they should just put up whatever anybody wants to put up. If they did that, I think there would be a lot more willingness on the part of its users, to both Twitter and Facebook, to think critically about the stuff they see, knowing that anything goes. It gives a false sense of security if Facebook blocks some stuff, like, oh, well, you know, the worst stuff is not getting up here, so I probably can trust most of it. That seems bad too. And then it really seems bad to put anybody, especially a Silicon Valley executive, in charge of determining right and wrong. That seems pretty tough. What would be wrong if Facebook and Twitter just said, Okay, we're not, anything goes.
Well, that may be where we end up without Section 230 in a sense. The back end of this, is, so Section 230 gives them the sword and the shield, both. Right. So everybody concentrates on the shield, but it gives them the sword. What happened before 230, and I highly recommend Jeff Kossoff's book, The 26 Words That Created the Internet. It is the definitive work on 230. Before 230, what publishers said, my lawyers said to me was, no, don't touch anything, because if you touch it once, and then you fail the next time, then you are more liable. That's what 230 got rid of. So you're going to have one extreme or another. You're going to have, on the one extreme, nobody can do nothing here because I could get in trouble for it. Or the other extreme is, I'm not touching nothing because I don't want to be blamed for it. I'm just a common carrier man. And that it would be an awful, awful internet. Now, I also put up a post. I'm going to go off for 1 second here, pardon me. But I put up a post where I took Benjamin Franklin's 1761, I think it was, apology for printers. And he wasn't an apology at all, but people were pissed at him for the stuff that he was printing. And it wasn't so much his newspaper, it was the ads that he printed for people. And they got mad at him. And he went on a beautiful rant that I took the word printer out and added in platform and social media and post and serve instead of the verb and noun print and printer. And it becomes clear that Franklin saw that printing was a platform.
Right.
And he said, there are things that I will not print. But if all you want is the things I agree with, you're not going to like that. Or if all you want is the things that you want and agree with, that's impossible.
That's exactly
so he saw printing as a platform. But he made judgments. He said there are things that I will not do. And Zuckerberg, too, makes judgments. And he's not made a judgment about Trump. And that's where
he pointed out in the phone call, they pulled a Trump ad down in March that misled users into thinking a campaign survey was the census, the U.S. Census. They did take that down. Yes. So he takes something down. He said in this phone call, this is The Verge reporting, that he's worried that free speech will only ratchet down. Over time, he said, in general, we tend to add more policies to restrict things more and more. If every time there's something that's controversial, your instinct is, okay, let's restrict a lot, then you do end up restricting a lot of things. I think eventually it'd be good for everyone. It is kind of Franklin-esque what he said. There's some things that we won't do, but most of the things we let through.
Well, but his line is very, sorry, Stacey, his line is a millimeter up from sea level. It's not very high. Stacey, sorry.
No, I was going to say he has made plenty, and Facebook as a platform has made plenty of editorial judgments. And
well, you could argue the algorithm does that in the newsfeed every single second, whether it's
and they focus on how to tune that, and they have historically made there's a couple things, and if you look at even free speech in the U.S., there are things that fire in a crowded theater is one of our favorites, right? There's pornography, obscenity. That's not actually a free speech. I think that's a sending it through the mail kind of legal argument. But there are things that we have, as a society, made a judgment about. There are things that, and I should say as a society based on like constitutional rights. As a private company, Zuckerberg and co. have made similar editorial judgments about similar categories.
Breasts.
And sometimes
breasts.
They've been wrong.
Right. I mean, they did the naked children and the Vietnam photo and breasts and breastfeeding. Yes.
So the key that I think we're looking for here is, do you say the president is lying, or do you say we don't want to incite violence, which is kind of like a fire in a crowded theater argument?
And ding. Exactly, Stacey.
And this is a really hard. I mean, these are big constitutional law cases for a reason. They're hard for people, and we have all these educated judges and, lawyers that get paid a lot and have thought about this a lot. We have like dozens of really smart people basically trying to figure this stuff out, and they really haven't been able to. I mean, I'll know it when I see it is kind of a big dodge. It was probably it's the right call, but it's a dodge.
Right.
So leaving that to what is essentially Mark Zuckerberg, that is scary. And that's what I think people freak out about, is because you've got, how old is he? 35? 38?
Well, and as somebody pointed out on TWiT, here you have a guy who never was not rich. Like he never had a chance.
Right.
He never had a chance to have normal developmental 20s. He went, 0 to a million.
Exactly. You have this person who is probably more isolated than other people whose life experience does not at all mirror any. And there is even a legal argument an argument in legal circles. How much does life experience? How much should it affect your arguments, your judgments? If you talk to like Sonia Sotomayor, she's like, yes, 100%. You talk to someone like John Roberts, he's probably like, no, even though it does. So you've got this person who is probably completely unequipped to really see and understand the issue at a level that they should, and at the importance that his employees and his users think is real. And so I think the walkout here is a cry to saying, hey, listen to us. You're not the only decider here.
Let me understand that, Stacey. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but I think there's a little bit of a conundrum in there. Is that in the end? So what I think I hear you saying is, and I agree, as I said it too, make this judgment with the help of others, with the help of your employees and your users and the oversight board and smart people. However, it's still his decision then, because he's the boss. It's his party. So in a way, I hear you saying, I don't trust you to make this decision, Mark Zuckerberg. Don't make it. On the other hand, I'm hearing you saying, yeah, no, make it.
I don't trust him to make the decision in isolation.
Alone.
Well, isn't that why he created this editorial board or whatever they call it? The governance board?
I don't know if he can actually make this decision. That's why I feel I want to fall down on one side or the other. Like theoretically, he should be able to make this decision. But the Mark Zuckerberg we've known is not someone who I would trust to make this decision, even after he's listened to people. And it's not just because I disagree with his decision. I just don't feel like he's empathetic enough. He's not. He doesn't have the mindset.
He's the boss, but he is the boss, and so I'm going to push you a little bit.
Okay.
He's the hand you're dealt. So what do you expect of him?
If he behaves like this, I expect. I am glad that his employees are walking out. Hopefully his users will abandon ship.
I'm going to quote Casey Newton here in The Verge, who says that the people he spoke to said that the majority of Facebook employees supported Mark. It was a small group. It was only 100 or so people in the walkout. But people were reluctant to say they supported Mark because it was such a flashpoint. Yeah, they didn't want the opprobrium. Zuckerberg, so Newton got a recording of this presentation that Mark did on Tuesday to his staff. And one of the quotes, according to the recording obtained by The Verge, Zuckerberg described being upset by Trump's recent posts, one of which warned protesters that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. But, quote, and this is Zuckerberg speaking, I knew that I needed to separate out my personal opinion from what our policy is and the principles of the platform we are running are, knowing that the decision we made was going to lead to a lot of people being very upset inside the company and a lot of the media criticism we're going to get. So he's not completely unaware. He sounds like he's self-aware. He can't be
unaware. This is the same thing, Matt.
We've given this guy, rightly or wrongly, this guy has huge influence worldwide. He's got 2.5
I think you're actually giving him too much credit, but that's fine.
I don't know. A lot of people get their news from Facebook.
I don't think most people see Donald Trump on Facebook. I don't think anybody sees Donald Trump on Facebook.
That's not even germane. They get their news from Facebook and from the algorithmically generated Facebook news.
Weird news. They get news that promotes Trump or promotes.
They get very little.
Whatever they're doing.
2% of their. It was 4% at its highest was news. They get hardly any news from Facebook. Very little. Which is to say, people don't get much news.
Now, I got rid of Facebook again because I couldn't take it. But for the month or two I was on Facebook, there's definitely in that stream content that sways you one way or the other.
You're weird.
I don't think so. It wasn't just
you're getting news. Most
friends.
people aren't getting news. Most news is a tiny, tiny portion. Now, I can argue that.
It's all everything in there is opinion of some kind or another. It's a polemic of some kind or another. Even if it's just burritos. Even if it's just, well, maybe it's burritos, but it's not. It's a lot of time. Oh, look at this influencer pretending to drill put up a board and then getting in a Mercedes. There's content in there. You may not call it news in your standard of what news is. It's news in the standard of what humans consider information about the world around them. And Mark controls it. He has a huge bully pulpit. Now, I don't think he controls it with his, like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. I think it's not that. I mean, I think the algorithm controls it, and he and his team give the rules to the algorithm.
I think you're going.
They're very powerful, though. You can't say they're not powerful.
Yeah, but I think in ways that do not have evidence. I don't think the evidence is there. Nonetheless, I'm critical.
Wait a minute. You don't think that people make decisions about politics based on what for some degree based on what they read on Facebook?
I come back to Ben Franklin and John Milton and
when Franklin's talking, he's talking as not a publisher, but as a printer, right?
No, he was talking as both.
Because he ran a print shop. He did have a newspaper. He was also
a publisher. He had a newspaper.
But I bet you that he made a distinction between what he'd be willing to run through his printing press and what he would be putting out over his name in his newspaper. We don't know.
We're actually not sure. Historians aren't sure what the apology is referring to, what kerfuffle, because they don't have the record. It was probably an ad in the newspaper. But we also have John Milton. And John Milton wrote the legendary Areopagitica in 1644 against the licensing of books in the UK. And I saw a lot of parallels between the Oversight Board and the Stationers Company, which was a private entity that was supposed to license and protect us from bad books. And Milton was inspired in great measure by his visit to Galileo, while Galileo was on house arrest because he had dangerous ideas. And Milton is saying that if we don't exercise our minds by hearing the good and the bad and finally deciding what is good, then, I'll be less articulate than him. We're going to end up with mush minds, right? So that's why I like Jack's view. Leave it up. It's out there anyway. The New York Times is going to report it. It's going to be all over. But Jack had a stand. Jack said this incites violence.
Ironically.
That's the question I have.
I mean,
Zuckerberg.
He took stands late. It was very late to the game.
Oh, he was. And I disagreed with his stand about ads. I disagree with lots of things. I'm just saying that in this one moment in time, I'll praise the one and push more on the other. I will
say that, Jeff, you are in the minority. According to Pew, 88% of Americans say that social media companies now have at least some control over the mix of news that people see each day. 55% of U.S. adults get their news from social media either often or sometimes, which is up 8% from 2018. 28% say they get their news often from social media, up from 20% in 2018 So
but that's what does that mean, Leo? That means that oftentimes
people get their news from Facebook.
Who do I follow? It's not Facebook. It's who you choose to follow on Facebook.
No, because
if you follow some of my neighbors.
Facebook shows you things that once you start clicking on things, Facebook will start showing you more things like it. And that's how you get people escalating down this weird trail of like conspiracy theories and anti-vax data, or think about all the stuff targeting moms around.
Facebook shows you a subset of the people you follow, full stop. So if you don't follow Alex Jones, you don't see Alex Jones.
You should follow. It also recommends who you will follow. It does.
Yeah, but I don't think that's I would argue that's not a major factor, and I want to see the evidence.
No, that is not true at all. Because when you go on Facebook and it's like, oh, it's kind of like you're interested in this, their whole business model is to find demographics that you fit in and to draw your attention to those things, and they do a really good job of it. And if you're sort of trying out weird ideas, they'll help you try those out till you get all the way down the path of those weird ideas. That's what they do. That's how they make their money.
The real problem I have with both of your arguments here is that it's a case of the third person effect, right? That there's tons of people out there that are affected by this, but I'm okay. I'm above it. But there's a lot of people who are just too stupid for this. And I think we always that's what both Franklin and Milton are trying to say to us. You weren't until a minute ago, but then you started into the algorithm is really taking people down a bad spot and it's going to ruin them. I don't buy that.
Researchers have looked at Facebook and seen that people are unaware that the algorithm is picking stuff up for them and even deciding what posts they see. Yeah,
the next step, Stacey, is that does this change their whole worldview?
Does it change everybody's? No, but it does change some, and it pushes.
I think they were already there, man. They were already there. No, which goes back to our first discussion. We are a racist country where the racists are going to find racist. Sorry, Carson, you got to edit that now.
No, you're wrong on this one. How many things have you bought based on seeing Instagram ads for? What was that linen shirt that you think? Some jacket.
That's why I also deleted Instagram.
Sorry, not a linen jacket.
My Lord, Stacey, I would not wear a linen shirt.
You bought a jacket. You bought some weird jacket. I remember that.
I did buy a jacket on Instagram.
Yeah, people complimented it. It's a nice jacket. What's the problem? Okay, so I watch certain shows and there are certain ads on them. Why are there ads on this show?
You see something enough times, there's influence, and you go down that path. And especially, and this is really important, if you are in a vulnerable spot, or maybe you feel sad or whatever, if you feel that, then you're more vulnerable to those messages. And yes, you can be smart as anything, but you're still going to buy the jacket.
Show me those studies. I'm sorry, but that's third person effect. Look, that's some people are vulnerable, but I'm not. They're vulnerable out there. This is going to affect them. They're sheeple, but I'm not.
No, people are not born racist. That's not.
Oh, they're trained racist very early in their lives.
They're trained racist. And
by their parents.
It's only their parents that have that influence?
Facebook.
Oh, wait a minute. You're saying only the parents train them that way?
Perfectly sane, well-educated, normal person and give them Facebook for a week, and they're going to turn into a complete
not for a week, but there's a gradual erosion.
No.
You don't think
it's the same as the myth? It's the myth of the filter bubble.
Do you think that the anti-vax movement would be as widespread and strong as it is without the help of social media?
Yes, because I've been in the kinds of these towns.
It would not.
Absolutely would not.
I lived in Austin.
Austin.
Uh-oh, she's frozen. Hold on a sec. We'll get her back.
Oh, that horrible sound. That ringing back. There you are. You're back. You said you lived in Austin, and then you froze.
I lived in Austin. My friends who went to Waldorf schools, I can tell you that not everybody is anti-vax, but with Facebook, more and more of them they would consider things that they wouldn't consider before. And from consideration, absent absolute scientific certainty,
it might play into your predisposition, but if you didn't consume these it's YouTube too, by the way, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, but YouTube and Facebook primarily for normal people. And I think you might have a predisposition to believe that thing, but it's the constant repetition of it from a variety of sources that we just go, oh, well, everybody believes this. It must be true.
So let me be very clear that we know what we know about the murder of George Floyd from a 17-year-old putting the video up on Facebook. That is how we know. And because mainstream media isn't covering this, never covered this, it's only because of Living While Black and Black Lives Matter on social media that we have the movements we have now to try to tear down the racism that you say is being built there. So this is what Franklin is saying. You're going to have both. And at the end, the only solution to this is not an algorithm and not a regulation. It's education, full stop. And the problem is that there are uneducated people who don't respect science and don't respect other people. And that's our problem in society. And we're ignoring that fundamentally by trying to blame get ready, moral panic about the technology and the algorithm. We're going for an easy bad guy and an easy answer. The problem is this country has devalued education over generations.
I think it's more nuanced than that. I think that all humans have a lot of inputs, and you can drown out some bad inputs like Facebook with good inputs like education. But
don't call Facebook entirely a bad influence. What did I just say about George Floyd?
Well, I'm not convinced that the news media
to dismiss it entirely. You are dismissing the people who are using this platform for that purpose.
I'm not convinced that the news media didn't have a lot to do with the dissemination of that story.
After that, yes, but the only way it started was, of course they did. Of course they did. But it started because that brave, probably scarred for life 17-year-old girl, young woman, had the courage to record a murder by police in front of her and put it onto social media because that was what she was capable of, which wasn't there years ago.
True.
And so to dismiss Facebook,
it was much easier
to
for her
dismiss Facebook as
to
successful is really bad. That has no nuance, Leo. That has zero nuance. You're dismissing all the voices that are then there. That is Franklin's point. That is Milton's point.
Well,
you've got to give people respect in the end.
I'm arguing for zero control. I think that it's a mistake to show some control because I think that's misleading, and it also lends to editorializing by some guy who just happened to get.
You think Jack did the wrong thing?
I don't know. I mean,
Stacey, what do you
I
think
choose to avoid the streams, to be honest with you.
No, I think he did the right thing on Twitter. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
The Twitter?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure. I just want to clarify.
What decision do you think, if you could sit down with Zuckerberg at a very nice dinner in his house and tell him, and he left saying, "You're right, Stacey," what would you tell him?
That's a good question. I don't know.
The only time I talked to Mark Zuckerberg, we talked about Memcache. So I'm like, well,
I don't know.
Oh no, we froze again.
That's a good way to freeze, though, I must say. I think that's literally Stacey's response.
Oh man, that was awesome.
No, I think that's a great question because
yeah, I mean, I'm really.
The problem is this is a tough.
This is hard.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very hard. Stacey.
So yeah, I'm like, oh.
Have you bought yourself time with a freeze there? I would
ask him where his loyalties lie. I think I would want to understand. Is this a moment to do the best for your business? Is this the moment to do the best for the country? Is there a larger picture that you should think about here? Because for his business, maybe it's, I don't know if, he knows way more about what's going on under the covers at Facebook than I do. So maybe that's the right decision based on his strategy and where he's trying to take it. But businesses do not exist. I know they feel like they do today, but they exist as part of a society. And I don't think it was the right decision for society. And I would try to convince him of that.
I have to say neither Facebook nor Twitter had any difficulty with COVID-19 and blocking bad information on
science.
Both those.
A lot different from politics,
right? So I think that it's possible to do a good job in some circumstances. It's much more difficult when you have a norm-busting president who is willing to use those platforms for his own ends to know how to handle this. Because the norm says the president should have a bully pulpit. Now, as Denise Howell pointed out on Sunday, he doesn't. He's got a bully pulpit with or without Twitter.
Yeah.
So, but he's very, very good at using Twitter. And Brad Parscale, his campaign manager, is very, very good at using Facebook. And that is a lot harder than saying, well, this is bad scientific information. So I don't know. And that's the problem is who should be the arbiter of truth? It's one thing to say who should be the arbiter of truth in science.
Truth. In this case, it's decency. It's I don't want to use the word civility because that's loaded. But that's what Stacey was saying a minute ago. It's what I'm trying to say too. What do you stand for? What does your company stand for?
Well,
right? Do you choose to sell cigarettes or not? CVS at some point said, we're in the health business. We're not going to sell cigarettes. Yeah. Right?
I have to say, some of the things Newton talks about in this phone call, 85-minute recording that he reviewed on The Verge. Here's a quote from Zuckerberg. If we're entering a period where there may be a prolonged period of civil unrest, then that might suggest we need different policies, even just temporarily in the U.S. for some period compared to where we were before.
Who's saying that?
Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg.
And we have some precedents for what that might look like. He's talking about the COVID misinformation. So I think he's thinking about this. I don't think Mark is
it's not blind.
evilly planning his, world domination. I don't think. But it's very difficult with a politician and politics compared to science.